The 2020 Democratic field starting to come into focus and getting a bit smaller. 3 candidates dropping out in the past 2 weeks. At the same time, others appearing to pick up steam. Elizabeth Warren drawing an estimated 15,000 people to rally in Seattle this week. And Bernie Sanders grabbing headlines with sharp attacks on Mitch McConnell while Sanders campaigned in Kentucky. And in 2 days, a big test for everyone. Wednesday is the deadline for candidates trying to qualify for the next debate. More than half of the field still hasn't qualified. My next guest is fighting to make the debate stage next month in Houston, 2020 presidential candidate and Senator from New York, Kirsten Gillibrand. Senator, thank you very much for joining us. Let me begin with your thoughts about how concerned you won't make that debate cutoff in the next 2 days.
I will make that debate stage. I intend to do so, and I hope that your viewers go to KirstenGillibrand.com and send $1 so that I can qualify. But I'm really excited about our campaign because I felt like we've led the debate on reproductive freedom, going to the front lines of Georgia and Missouri, on gay rights in this country, and on getting money out of politics. All issues that we need to be debated on the next stage, which is why I intend to get there.
A fair point, but there aren't any specific polls between now and then to suggest that you will perhaps make that debate stage. You need to meet both of those, the donor threshold and 3 more qualifying polls. Do you have an update as to where you stand on both of those today?
We just had a qualifying poll out of Iowa, and we're hoping there's more local polls in Iowa and New Hampshire, states where I've spent a lot of time. I've been there almost a dozen times each, and it makes a difference to talk to first-in-the-nation primary voters and caucus goers about your vision, about why you're running and why you believe you're the best person to take on Trump, and that's exactly what I've done.
Senator, let me get your thoughts on the G7 and turning to some of the big issues affecting the world. Today, Trump suggested hosting the next G7 at his Doral Resort in Florida. What is your reaction to that?
I think it's entirely unacceptable and sounds like he's lining his own pockets. It is inappropriate on every level. And I think President Trump really harmed America's economy and future in how he handled the G7 meetings. I think 6 of the participants are working together to get things done, and America's really on the sidelines.
Let me actually play you this soundbite first, and then I'll get your reaction. So this is President Trump talking about Russia rejoining the G7.
I think it would be better to have Russia inside the tent than outside the tent. Do we live either way? Yes, we live either way. Is it politically popular for me to say that? Possibly not. I think a lot of people would agree with me, frankly, but possibly not. I do nothing for politics.
Senator, what is your reaction to that statement about Russia and the fact that the president is saying he does nothing for politics? Does that surprise you?
President Trump is an embarrassment on the world stage. He's unwilling to stand up to Putin. And the reason why Russia is not included is because of their behavior, because of their efforts to annex another country, to actually try to undermine another country's sovereignty. That is why they were excluded, because of their behavior. And President Trump is unwilling to stand up to strongmen, unwilling to stand up to Putin. And we've seen it. We've seen it from his performance at Helsinki and his performance just recently.
One of the more telling moments of the G7 summit was President Trump skipping the climate meeting. Was it a mistake also for the DNC to reject holding a climate change debate specifically about this topic? If you're trying to encourage voters or people in America to take climate change seriously, and you have a climate denier as president not attending G7 meetings about it, and the DNC not holding debates about it, what do you make of that?
I will make attacking global climate change a cornerstone of my presidency. If you have a threat as grave as global climate change to humanity, you need a solution that's as bold and as big as the problem you're trying to face. And I can pass a Green New Deal. I know how to get things done. I can reach across the aisle and have investments in infrastructure, in green jobs, in clean air, clean water. I will put a price on carbon, and I will make sure the polluters pay. I put forward a robust policy of public-private partnerships as well as state investments into attacking global climate change aggressively, because I think we should get to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. I think we should have net zero carbon emissions for electricity in the next 10 years. And it's an aspirational goal that will be a measure of our competitiveness and how great our engineers and scientists are. I will not only re-sign on to our global climate accords, but I will lead a worldwide conversation about what we can do more. I will not start a space race with Russia. I will start a green energy race with China, and that's how you get it done.
Let me get your final thoughts on a debate that is taking place among the Democratic Party. Last week, Jill Biden said that her husband, Joe, is the most electable, even if he is not the Democratic voters' favorite. I'm curious to get your thoughts. Is electability simply enough of an argument for voters to go out and choose a candidate? Is it enough to just say, can you beat Donald Trump, or should you represent something bigger than that?
I think the issues we face are bigger than that, but I do think you have to beat Donald Trump. And I believe that I have the most electable experience than anyone. Not only did I run in a 2-to-1 Republican district twice and won by 24 points, but I just won back 18 counties that went to Trump. And I've brought together my state with the highest vote threshold in its history, higher than Obama, higher than Hillary, higher than Trump, higher than anyone who's run for Senate or governor ever. And I not only perform electorally, but I bring people together and get things done. I just passed 18 bills in the last Congress, all of which President Trump signed into law. He does not know he signed my bills, but he did. And that's because I can bring this country together. So you do need to beat Trump, number one. And number two, you need to restore this nation and bring it back together again, heal the wounds that have been created, the divides created by President Trump, and move us forward and restore our moral leadership on the world stage. That's why I'm running, and that's why I believe I'm the best candidate to beat Trump.
All right, we'll wait and see if you do, in fact, make it to that final debate threshold in the next couple of days. Senator and 2020 candidate Kirsten Gillibrand, thank you very much for your time this afternoon, Senator.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.